The term Shiva B'October is a homonym in Hebrew, translating to both Shiva, the seventh day of the month, and Shiva, the 7-day mourning period that we observe after the loss of a loved one. The duality captures the deep grief and trauma that has enveloped Israel and the Jewish people worldwide since that day. The horrors of October 7th was not just an attack on the state of Israel. It also shattered something fundamental in the Jewish psyche, leaving us to sit in a state of Shiva that a year later feels as though it may never end. As I stand before you today, I feel a tremendous sense of gratitude for the strength that we derive from each other. If you're like me, one of the most challenging aspects of this last year has been what legal scholar Tal Becker calls a penetrating sense of aloneness. It's a sense of isolation, an unfathomable realization that in our darkest hour we were left alone, abandoned by a world that we believed understood our suffering. In the wake of the October 7th Hamas attack, I've struggled with that sense of isolation. The brutality, the massacre of innocent civilians, the sexual assault of women, and the horrifying abduction of hostages shook all of us. And yet, as we looked around at the world's response, it became clear that many did not grasp the extent of our suffering. The solidarity that we longed for felt elusive, and in its place, we found a world quick to judge, quick to condemn, slow to acknowledge the depth of the trauma inflicted upon us. What compounded this sense of isolation was the surge of anti-Semitism that followed. From hateful protests and violent rhetoric, we saw a wave of hostility directed not just at Israel, but at Jews everywhere. It wasn't simply that the world was indifferent to our pain. It seemed that in too many places, the pain was ignored, downplayed, or even justified. Suddenly, Jews in Toronto, London, Paris, New York, and elsewhere found themselves under attack, vilified for the action of the Jewish state, despite the existential threat posed to Israel. Even within our own Jewish communities, we found division and discord. Some rallied in staunch defense of Israel's right to protect itself, while others voiced criticisms, often framing the conflict in terms of broader ideological battles that overshadowed the immediate threat to Jewish lives. These debates, while important, left many of us feeling fractured and uncertain about where we stood within our community. In the media, we saw a distorted portrayal of events, one that prioritized political narratives over the raw reality of Jewish suffering. It all added to the overwhelming sense of loneliness. I worry constantly about family and friends in Israel who live under the ongoing threat of rocket fire, terror attacks, now incursions, and Iranian ballistic missiles. You know, my daughter, Ziva, while currently here for the Chagim, lives in Haifa. As a parent, I'm both extremely proud of her decision to tie her future and destiny to that of the Jewish people and to the Jewish state. And I worry a lot. I worry about all the children grandchildren, family, and friends of our Beth Tzedec community, and there are a lot of them. I worry about them in Israel as well, and we at Beth Tzedec strive constantly to reach out to you and to your families to check in, to make sure you're okay, to let you know that we're here for you. I sometimes feel helpless, wondering what more can be done to ensure their safety, living only moments away from danger. The sense of powerlessness can feel overwhelming, and yet through it all, there remains a collective resilience. In moments of despair, I think about our long history as a people. For millennia, we have known exile, persecution, and suffering. From Egypt to Babylon, from the Crusades to the Shoah, the Jewish people have endured hardship and destruction only to rise again. In psychology, this ability to rise again is referred to as post-traumatic growth. It's the opposite of post-traumatic stress. Researchers found that 20% of people that experience trauma never recover. But surprisingly, 50 to 60% of trauma survivors not only recover, but experience growth as a result of it. Post-traumatic growth is the positive psychological change that can occur after experiencing trauma. It leads individuals, and in our cases, a people, to develop new strengths and perspectives, including resilience, deeper relations, new possibilities in life, enhanced personal strength, and spiritual development. The Machzor is an anthology of post-traumatic growth experiences. Unatana Tokef is a profound example. This ancient and haunting prayer, the climax of the Musaf Amidah, vividly portrays the themes of divine judgment, the fragility of human life, and our people's continuing faith in God's mercy and justice. The most poignant section of Unatana Tokef reads, Rosh Hashanah yikatevun, uvayom tzom kippur yechatemun. On Rosh Hashanah, it is written. On Yom Kippur, it is sealed. Mi yichya mi yamut, who will live and who will die. Mi b'mayim umi ba'esh, who by water and who by fire. Mi b'cherev, who by sword, by war, umi by chaya, umi by beast. These lines invoke the uncertainty of life and the harsh realities of suffering, historically and today, reflecting the precariousness of our people. Despite this acknowledgement of suffering, the prayer also stresses the power of repentance, of prayer, and of tzedakah, offering a path toward perseverance and renewal. This duality of vulnerability and hope underscores our Jewish historical experience and the enduring belief in the possibilities of redemption. But this history of survival comes at a heavy price. It forces us to confront an ancient question about our people from Parshat Balak. In the Parsha, the Moabite king Balak hires Bilam, a prophet, to curse the Israelites. But each time Bilam comes to curse them, God intervenes, and instead, Bilam offers a blessing. One of the most famous of these blessings is Hen Am Levadad Yishkon, that this people, the Israelite people, the Jewish people, our people, we are Am Levadad Yishkon, a people that dwell apart. Uvagoyim lo yitchashav, that the nations of the world will not reckon. The question is our suffering simply part of the larger narrative that we as Jews are destined to live? Are we doomed to forever be the outcasts, the ones who suffer, while the world stands by and watches? No one felt more badad, more alone, more abandonment than those who were in the Gaza envelope on October 7th, or the hostages that remain in captivity. If you haven't yet seen the documentary, We Will Dance Again, you should do so. It captures with haunting clarity the experience of young people at the Nova Music Festival who Hamas terrorists hunted. They called out for help. They dialed the emergency numbers, and they waited. And no one came. One survivor actually thought that Israel was conquered. There was no other explanation for why it was that the IDF nor the police didn't arrive to rescue them. A poem by Asaf Gur entitled Kaddish distressingly captures the devastation of that day. Yitgadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, and no one came. Many thousands called to him on Shabbat morning, crying his name out loud, tearfully begging him just to come. Aval hu shavat mikol malachto, but he had ceased from all his work. No God arrived. No God provided comfort. Only Satan celebrated uninterrupted, dancing between kibbutzim and the festival of death, the festival of slaughter. When I was practicing this, I wasn't expecting this emotional response that I'm having. But this is an emotional time. The sense of abandonment deepened in the days that followed. The initial shock of the attack began to wear off, and Israel found itself increasingly isolated on the world stage. Bernard-Henri Levy, in his new book that came out just a couple weeks ago, Israel Alone, writes, rarely has negationism functioned so well and so quickly. While war is always tragic and should give all pause, the misuse of the word genocide to describe Israel's defensive measures is an affront to the memory of those who have actually experienced genocide. It is a distortion of reality and a perversion of the truth. For a brief moment after October 7th, just a brief moment, there was a wave of global solidarity with the dead and those who mourned them. But as Levy points out, this initial wave of unity quickly gave way to a gale of anti-Semitism, a tempest of hatred for Jews without precedent since the Second World War. We have witnessed it here at home. From protests that shout, say it loud, say it clear, we don't want no Zionists here, to the vandalism of synagogues, Jewish businesses, and community centers, we have felt the weight of this new wave of hate. That's why to some, Rosh Hashanah this year feels more like Tisha B'Av, the mourning for the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem, the saddest day on the Jewish calendar. The words that come to mind are the opening words of Eicha, Eicha yoshva badad. Oh, how Jerusalem sits desolate and Badad alone. Like Jerusalem in ruins, we continue to sit in mourning, isolated from the world, feeling forsaken and abandoned. In commenting on Bilam's prophecy that Israel is hen am levadad yishkon, a people that dwell apart, Rashi suggests that Bilam recognized that the Jewish people would remain distinct, not intermingling with others that might seek to overpower them or force them to abandon God's Torah. Our unique religious and moral laws define Kedusha, holiness, as setting us apart, such as in our observance of Kashrut and Shabbat. For Rashi, this is the blessing of Bilam's statement, our uniqueness. Some can't see it as a blessing no matter how they look at it. They see it as the curse in which it was intended to be, a recognition that the Jewish people will always be outsiders, forever estranged from the nations of the world. Theodor Herzl was someone who saw it that way. We have honestly endeavored everywhere, he writes, to merge ourselves in the social life of surrounding communities and to preserve the faith of our fathers. We are not permitted to do so. Herzl believed that the establishment of the State of Israel would normalize the Jewish experience, the Jewish people. No longer would we be a people apart. With a state of our own, we could take our rightful place among the family of nations. And yet, history has proved that far more complicated. Prime Minister Menachem Begin, a leader who profoundly understood the weight of Jewish history, often reflected on this paradox. In his book, The Prime Ministers, Yehuda Avner writes that Begin was known to host great scholars like Nechama Leibowitz and Ephraim Erbach for Shabbat afternoon Torah study. During one such session, the discussion turned to Bilam's words. A lively debate broke out about whether this dwelling apart was a blessing or a curse. Begin, ever the pragmatist, sought to end the debate with a simple observation. The Jewish people do dwell apart. There is no denying this reality. To illustrate his point, Begin read from Dr. Yaakov Herzog's book, A People That Dwells Alone. This is what he read that afternoon. A people that dwells alone is the natural concept of the Jewish people. If one asks how the ingathering of the exiles came about, or how the state of Israel could endure such severe security challenges, or how it has built up a flourishing economy, or how the unity of the Jewish people throughout the diaspora has been preserved, one must come back to the primary idea that this is a people that dwell alone. Begin closed the book, smiled, and then said, "Cease dwelling alone, and you cease to exist." What a conundrum. What a conundrum. Though we may feel abandoned at times, feelings are different from reality. We are a people that dwell apart, but we are never truly isolated, never totally abandoned. God is with us, and even more importantly, we are with each other. There have been numerous acts of solidarity for Jews and Israelis on and post-October 7th. Rami Davidian, for example, a 58-year-old farmer, saved 750 people from the Nova Festival, including a girl hiding among terrorists. He pretended to be one of the attackers, speaking Arabic to convince them to leave her unharmed, demonstrating unimaginable courage and quick thinking. In Toronto, thousands of us and our allies have participated in solidarity rallies in support of Israel, in support of the hostages, in support of women, and to stand against anti-Semitism. On Monday, many thousands of us will gather again to commemorate the first anniversary of October 7th, to be together. Support also extends beyond the Jewish community. We have friends. There's a new group that started a couple weeks ago. It's on Twitter and social media. Take Allies for a Strong Canada, for example. This group is dedicated to fighting anti-Semitism in Canada and around the world, and is made up mostly of non-Jews expressing words of support. Or actress Patricia Heaton, who launched a campaign encouraging Christians to affix mezuzot to their doorposts. There's been a run on mezuzot since she did this. Thousands of Christians are now putting mezuzot on their doorposts. Or leaders like Reverend Jason Biasi and Reverend David Lamore, with whom we created prayer and song experiences to combat anti-Semitism, echo interfaith allyship, and reinforce the idea that even in tough times, we are not really ever Am Levadad Yishkon, a people that are abandoned, alone. We have allies. During the break on Yom Kippur, David and Jason will be with us to discuss why interfaith work for them is important, especially now. And support extends to Israel as well. Let's acknowledge that though it seems Israel is isolated on the world stage, it too is not totally badad abandoned. It has the most important country in the world supporting it. Just Tuesday, we witnessed how important that support is, as the United States and other allies, including those in the Middle East, joined together to defend the Jewish state from Iranian attacks. For the second time, hundreds of missiles were fired at Israel, and the entire nation found itself in a bomb shelter, but those attacks were stopped or neutralized. That takes billions of dollars of investment, technological advancement, years of training that result in an amazing umbrella of defense. Israel is stronger today as a result of these alliances, built on our shared values and strategic interests. We may be Am Acher, a different people, but we are Lev Echad, of one heart, when it really matters. Out of this deep pain lies the potential for our post-traumatic growth. Just as we have done throughout our entire history, we can emerge from this trauma stronger, more united, more determined to fulfill our purpose. Post-traumatic growth doesn't mean forgetting the trauma or pretending it didn't happen. It means integrating this pain into our collective story and using it as a source of strength and resilience. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur support post-traumatic growth by encouraging reflection, renewal, and healing. Rosh Hashanah's focus on new beginnings fosters hope, while Yom Kippur's emphasis on forgiveness and letting go of resentment, which aids emotional recovery. Observing these holy days in a communal setting strengthens resilience through shared support, and their spiritual themes provide a framework for finding meaning and leading to transformation. This is the heart of Unatana Tokef. While we cannot control everything that happens to us, we can choose how we respond. Through tshuva, tefillah, utzdaka, we can mavirin et roa hagazera, transform even the greatest pain into the greatest strength. What would post-traumatic growth look like for the Jewish people in a post-October 7th world? First, it may lead to an even deeper sense of unity among Jews worldwide, as we recognize that despite our ideological differences, we share a common fate and a common purpose. The horrors of October 7th may remind us of the need to support one another, not just in bad times, in times of crisis, but in everyday life. Second, the trauma can deepen our moral responsibility. As historically persecuted people, we value justice, dignity, and compassion. Post-traumatic growth may inspire us to be stronger advocates for peace and for human rights, including for our enemies, without abandoning our right for self-defense. Of course, Palestinian leadership and much of the Islamist leadership in the world must rise to their responsibility to ensure that their desire for self-determination does not rely on our destruction or through a failed or terror state. But by balancing our strength with compassion, we can fulfill our calling, our ethical duty, and show the world what it means to be Am Levadad Yishkon, a people who dwell apart, who work to bring healing for ourselves and for others, for the world. Finally, post-traumatic growth for the Jewish people may come in the form of renewed spiritual vitality. In times of crisis, many of us turn inward, seeking comfort in our tradition, in prayer, and in connection to holiness. The pain we have endured can lead us to ask tough questions about faith, destiny, and the meaning of suffering. But it can also bring us closer to God as we draw strength from the enduring wisdom of our Torah and the example of our ancestors. The spiritual awakening that may arise from this tragedy could infuse Jewish life with a renewed sense of purpose and meaning, ensuring that the next chapter of our story is not just one of surviving, but of thriving. After the destruction of the Second Temple, we created the Mishnah. After the Inquisition and expulsion from Spain, Sfat became a center of Kabbalah. In the 18th century, the Hasidic movement arose, celebrating spirituality and joy even in dark times. Zionism. Let's reclaim this word. Own it. Zionism rekindled the dream of a Jewish homeland following the pogroms of Europe, and it culminated in the establishment of the State of the Jewish People in 1948 following the Shoah, the darkest time in all of human history. As Jews, we have always understood that there is possibility of light even in the face of darkness. We will grow from this trauma too. We will turn our pain into creativity and meaning. This is our strength. This is our resilience. This is our blessing of being distinct, of being Am Levadad Yishkon, a people that dwells apart. Amen.